That's popping up. Okay, so welcome everybody to our Monday Brown Bag Lunch presentation. Today we are really lucky to have Social Justice Philanthropy Giving to Make a Systemic Change with Anne Braak Katz and the Humboldt Social Justice Donor Circle. So today's Brown Bag presentation is brought to you because of the generous support of the Friends of OLLI. And the Friends of OLLI are a group of community members who gratefully donate some funds and help us bring these presentations to you. Also, as a reminder, our OLLI memberships are open now and they go from July to June 2022. And these OLLI memberships are really beneficial to community members in general because they give you access to the library,
We lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It's windy down here, guys. It's windy. So like I was saying, yes, the OLLI memberships are open now, and they also help our program get some quality instructors and things of that nature. So you can go on our website and sign up for them. As of today, we have 408 members. I think this has actually increased to 600. We might have to update this. So we're lucky to have all of you. We also want to mention that on Fridays, we have a Let's Connect meeting at 10 a.m. and it's with Tracy Barnes-Priestley, and I get the honor of hosting these, and it's a group of people who get together, and every week there's a different discussion topic. I'm lucky because I get to sit in and learn from them. Also, as a reminder, like you guys saw earlier, this brown bag presentation is going to be recorded, and you can find all of that on our website. You can click here on the yellow arrow in a drop down and click on brown bag presentations, or you can just find it on the main page here and click on that purple square in the middle, and you will find our archive. That's linked to our YouTube channel, and you can find lots and lots of recordings from our previous brown bag presentation. This brown bag lunch presentation will be up later on this week. Usually give us around 3 days to get that up for you guys. But without further ado, we ask that you please mute yourselves while the presenters are talking. And if you have any questions, we are going to be accepting those during the presentation. And also putting your questions in the chat is okay too, and I can go ahead and read those aloud at the end. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Jane, and she can introduce our instructors for us. Oh, you're muted, Jane.
Sorry about that. I'm happy to welcome you all today to our Brown Bag Lunch program and to our invited guests, 6 members of the Humboldt County Social Justice Donor Circle. And our presenter, Anne Braak Katz, is a member of the circle, and they have been meeting, learning, and giving as a group since 2018. They are a group of Humboldt County residents dedicated to learning about social justice philanthropy, and making grants to help make systemic change in our community. Today, we will learn about social justice philanthropy, and how to contribute to systemic change in our region. You will discover ways to give and to make systemic change, and find out what it means to give upstream. And we'll talk about real world examples in our community and problem solve together. It's all yours.
Good day.
All yours, Tate. And Anne, I'm sorry. It's all yours, Anne.
Hi, nice to see you all here today. Thank you so much for coming. I'm actually sitting here with my dear friend and donor circle member, Felicia Oldfather. And the goals of our workshop today are to deepen our understanding of social justice and how we can make our philanthropic dollars go further in our region.
And we're going to start out by giving some history of our work together. And our goal is to, by the end, we will share with some of the examples of our giving that we have done and how we felt about it. And also the virtues that we feel are gained by things that are gained by solving problems together and talking them out together. At the beginning, we're somewhat kind of curious about why some of you signed on to this, and we've got enough people on, so we don't have room for everybody. But if you have can you explain briefly why you signed on today? I don't know quite technologically how you do that. Maybe you raise your hand. You probably know how to do it.
Yeah, with the reactions down below, if anybody wants to raise their hand and say why they're here today.
Yeah.
Or put it in the chat.
Or you can put it in the chat. Nobody wants to do that.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on from here. So we, a group of us in 2017 started through the leadership of Ron White of the Humboldt Area Foundation and Len Wolf to pull together our money to impact social change in our community.
My turn. I think the idea was that we're all out here thinking things and thinking of wondering why we can't improve things and how to make things better, and that if we pool our resources, we would have a more significant amount of money to give to do that. And what we did, we started meeting once a month, and we talked about a lot of different things, and we were kind of floundering, I would say, for a while, just because we weren't all the same group, and we would get together and we were trying to puzzle over what was worth doing and what wasn't worth doing and how to do things better. And we finally decided to get together for a kind of a weekend retreat with a facilitator. And after a couple of days, we had a clearer vision of what we were doing. And I'll share with you our vision that we came up with. It's not perfect, and I think we're in the process of thinking about how to modify it. If any of you have ever been to strategic planning retreats, you know what I mean about that. But our vision, this was our vision. Our vision for Humboldt County is a community that meets the basic needs of its members, a community in which all people are treated with dignity and have a sense of belonging. And that's not a perfect, that's not a perfect set of descriptions, but it's what we came up with at the time. And we decided to focus ourselves on wanting to narrow things down a little more on education, health, housing, and economic and social justice, which, are all things that you could spend a lot of, time on each one. And over the 3 years that we have been together, we have given away $477,000 and $477,250, which is altogether almost $500,000. I was really startled when I saw that number. but yeah, it's your turn, Annie. We kind of divided our project here, and we get a little confused. Don't worry.
So we are focusing on social justice, which in a nutshell means equal rights and equitable opportunities for all. And social justice giving focuses on systemic change that addresses the root causes of racial, economic, and environmental injustices, and not just the symptoms.
The idea is to focus on issues identified by socially or economically vulnerable and marginalized populations as important to them. And I think that perhaps requires a little explanation. It's not, I think our point there and our way of thinking about it is that we don't want to be people sitting at home or in our meetings and saying, this is what's good for Joe and Susie, and Bill, you know, because they're having difficulties. I think the idea of it is that movement for social change should come from the people that would be affected by it in a good way, or in other words, people getting together and assessing their own needs and deciding what they would like to have done, rather than people sitting over here and saying, you should do that, you should do this, you should do that. And I think the idea that Annie was expressing, which is probably the most complicated idea of the day here that we're trying to put forth, is how do you address root causes of difficulties in our society? How do you figure out how to change the root causes as opposed to dealing with the final outcome of some problem in one area, you know, becoming a problem in another area? And how do we promote changes in these policies and structures that'll make them different? And how do we systematically heal the problems? And I feel like when I try to articulate this, as I'm doing in a kind of bumbling way, and when we all do, you know, we run into difficulties because it isn't really clear. If somebody doesn't have food over here, why don't they have food? You know, they might not have food because, you know, immediately they don't have money, but why don't they have money? And how far back can you go behind that to try and deal with those problems, not just the fact that they don't have food.
So when we seek social justice organizations to give our money to, we're really looking for organizations that engage with the most affected by the social issue, and seeking problems for those most affected by the injustice. And these issues often include racial, gender, and environmental equity, and planning and implementing these social changes are the organizations that we're seeking when looking for who we want to grant money to.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to find organizations and people that are considering, you know, considering equity issues and diversity issues in the way they operate.
For sure.
And I think that's kind of what Annie was trying to get at there.
Thank you.
So when you sit around with a pile of money, which in our group we were lucky enough to be doing, when you say, what should we do with this? One way of looking at it is to try to look long term. You know, not so much solve an immediate problem, but look at what we're going to be hearing about in a few minutes, looking upstream and trying to figure out what kind of changes will bring us more social justice.
And systemic change, critically systemic change. And as long-term upstream as compared to downstream, which is more short-term and direct services. Also, as a group during this COVID crisis, we chose to give money more spontaneously to crisis and urgent issues, and that is quite important too, and it has its moment. And while we really do try to focus on upstream change, there's definitely times when we're working spontaneously with the crisis of the moment, and we encourage you to do that as well.
I was trying to think, Annie, about if I were listening to this, what question would I have? And one of my questions would be, well, how did you find people that you wanted to fund, or groups you wanted to fund? And in our case, we've done this for 3 years now. So now people find us to a certain extent. But at the beginning, I think we were much helped by Humboldt Area Foundation, because they get requests for money from people. So they were able to share some of those requests with us and help us find the kind of people that we were interested in funding.
And then we would go through a series of interviews to ask them what they were doing, and later would discuss, does this align with our vision and our values? The whole upstream philanthropy is made more concise in this little video that Alex is going to put up for us right now. And then Len is going to discuss upstream philanthropy.
Annie, there's a question.
Okay,
There's a question from somebody.
What is the boundaries of your interest?
you mean the physical boundaries?
Yeah, the physical boundaries. Is it Humboldt or?
Yeah, well, so far it's been mostly Humboldt, maybe a little of, because we've been working with some of the Native American groups, so we're probably pushing a little bit into Del Norte and,
It's just
Yeah.
more or less
but
local.
it's been mostly pretty local.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Also, Jane has a question. She asked, do you have an articulated set of criteria or priorities for selecting projects to fund?
and articulate.
The priorities really are what we were discussing in our vision, and we actually are really looking for issues of racial, gender, and environmental equity, and social concerns with those that fit within these categories. And so we just do, through a series of interviews, we find out where they're at, and then as a group we discuss if they're aligned with our vision.
But I think I don't know quite the difference between criteria and focus, but we also were wanting to focus on these things that I mentioned before of education and housing.
Yes,
Health.
Jane.
Well, do you have you conduct a series of interviews, but do you actually have them submit a written proposal of some sort and that articulates what their goals are, their timeframes, things like that?
Yeah, we do. We have people write grant proposals, but actually over the years, we've pared that down to where people don't have to spend a lot of their hard-earned time and money to write grant proposals, but we're having them have more of a conversation instead of have this fancy grant written, because that just takes away from the work that they're trying to do. So we've really pared that down quite a bit.
It's been more of a, what I would call I think in the business, a site visit. So we kind of, go to some, Annie and I went to some people's house once out in Hoopa to talk to them. And I just, with Zoom times, I did a visit with somebody on Zoom just to find out what they're doing. And then we kind of have a forum that we use, and we're trying to find out, as far as we can tell, besides just what the people are interested in doing, if they have connections with other groups, who they collaborate with, if they're fiscally responsible and set up through some nonprofit, because since we're operating as under the nonprofit rules, we need to give money to a nonprofit, to other nonprofit organizations. So people who aren't structured that way themselves need a nonprofit sponsor. And beyond that, we've been pretty trusting of people. We asked them, later to give us a report.
Yeah.
We didn't. It's a kind of a delicate balance, I think, but we didn't want to hover over people and micromanage them at all.
And I would also say that sometimes when we find a cause that is not a nonprofit, that doesn't have their status through they're not an affiliate of a larger umbrella, we choose just as individuals to give to them, because we see that it's a worthy cause. So that's mostly it's to official nonprofits, but sometimes it's not.
How do you follow up? just out of curiosity with them, do they stay in contact with you and report back periodically?
Yeah.
Do you have results that you can discuss?
The following year, we asked for a report back, and then we discuss it in our donor circle groups, which are actually really nice, even in Zoom, nice. We're all rather aligned with what we're doing. And so we talk about, did it actually fulfill what we had hoped it would? And for the most part, it does. And sometimes it actually doesn't. And you think, well, we had the best of intentions, but maybe over time they come back around and we find, oh yeah, that money was well spent, and community leadership came out of that, or guidance in the community, and it's, in general, it's been pretty great. The reports we've gotten back, we feel really good about the organizations we've chosen.
Okay, thank you, Annie. I'm gonna go ahead and share the video. And let me know if you guys can hear this, okay, if it's too loud.
Of all of our problems. There's a story called Upstream and Downstream. This is how the story goes. In the story, there's two towns. One's called Upstream, one's called Downstream, and there's a mighty river that goes between them. The people in Downstream, they live happily. But one day, they look in the river and they see somebody and they're drowning. And the person shouts, "Help, help me, help me." And the people of Downstream, of course, jump in and they help that person. But a week later, they see someone else into the river. And that person in the river, they save that person too. And then once a week, there's someone in the river. So the people in Downstream, they organize, they raise property taxes, and they do everything they can to save more and more and more people. But then there's someone in the river every 3 days, then every 2 days, and then twice a day. So they built a hospital at the side of the river to save more and more people. They need to save all these people who are coming to Downstream who are drowning. And then there are more people every day. And they save as many as they can, and they save people beautifully. And the people of Downstream are tired, but they save people day after day, and they get better at saving people. But there's one thing. And the people Downstream never do this one simple thing, which is they never ask, what is going on upstream? And unless we know the cause of our problems, we're only going to be treating the symptoms. Unless we look upstream and we see what is causing our problems, what is getting us angry, what is keeping us from being kind, until we look at that, we're never going to stem the flow of all of our problems.
Len, do you want to talk about upstream a little bit? Unmute yourself, Len.
You. By a show of hands, if anybody felt like that helped to clarify anything, raise your hand so I get a sense. Okay, a lot of people don't have their picture up, so I can't really tell. Okay, all right, so it clarified things for a lot of people. So what in your own mind would be an example locally of giving downstream? That's the easy one to identify. What would be an example locally of giving downstream? Just unmute yourself and shout out.
United Way, Red Cross.
Okay, good.
Food for people,
Okay,
Equity Arcata.
Betty Chin.
Arcata House.
okay. Now these are all fabulous organizations, and we need them. What would be some examples of giving upstream locally, if you can think of any? Those are much harder to think about.
Cooperation Humboldt.
Supporting affordable housing at the community level, for example, in city by city.
Right. So you can see by the pause that this is our dilemma, that it's much harder to figure it out. So affordable housing is a great example. So we also, a lot of people named a lot of places that work with people who are homeless. They caught them once they're downstream, but how do we catch them when they're upstream? So that's a problem that a lot of people were trying to figure out, and we're trying to figure out in terms of the things we give to. Annie, are you going to talk about the organizations, or did you want me to?
Yeah, we could actually just go.
What, the ones, some of the
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
that we have funded?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm actually thinking in a very literal way. What about logging? So is logging, if people want to, are concerned about logging issues and want to change them, is that upstream or downstream? Just shout out what you think.
Logging.
So what do we have to, so logging provides people with jobs, right? Provides education, provides food, all those things. So if we want to impact or make a change in logging, then we have to look upstream to help people, not just say we're going to stop the logging, because that would be stopping it downstream. We have to do more than stop it. We have to actually address the things that are upstream that the people really need. So that would be a real example.
But I thought you were talking about local things.
So we are talking about local things, but do we live downstream from a lot of places where we are locally? I mean, literally, we are downstream from all the people up above us who are cutting trees, right?
But if you cut trees up there, that's an upstream problem.
But if it floats down to where we are, is that a problem down where we are? Literally, it is, because it impacts us. So sometimes we have to go way beyond where we are to deal with things. So it's complicated, Theodore.
Yeah, a lot of things. There are a lot of societal things that you could say the same thing about.
Exactly.
You're
Right.
branching out, or if that begins to be your interest, then
Right.
it's a different story.
Right. So if we want to stay local and we want to help people who are migrant workers, then we have to help them locally as opposed to going to their countries and helping them, which is ultimately what needs to happen. But we have to help them here locally. You're right. So it gets very confusing. So I think Annie and Felicia to give you some examples of places that we've donated to.
Yeah, we picked 4 that we have donated to that we would like to talk about. One is Cooperation Humboldt, which I would say that we provided some valuable seed money to get going. And they basically have a philosophy of promoting economic democracy, and this has led them to do some work in worker-owned businesses, and also seeking, which I think just happened, a change in state law that's going to allow public banking. I don't know how that's going to work, but it sounds like a good, interesting idea. And they also, had started a presence in the community. And when COVID came, they were able to respond to that, pulling together a lot of different groups that were working, trying to help out with the COVID situation. They have a large program in food security. Part of you, probably a lot of you here, if you're in Humboldt County, have seen the Food Guide, which is a great publication that tells a lot about gardening, composting, all different kinds of sources of food and people who are growing food, and a lot of different ideas about food, which is certainly a very important issue in our community. And they're also working with the Wiyot tribe in a organization called Dishkamu, which is planning some working on housing issues in Eureka. They've got a variety of different things, and they are they're working, they have study groups trying to train their own leadership. And if you look at their website, as I did the other day, they have a lot of, you can find out a lot about how they're structured and the kind of people that they're working with. And it's pretty exciting, and they've been able to have a lot of reach in the community. And they're also working with another group that we helped get going called Centro del Pueblo. Centro del Pueblo is a project of the Seventh Generation Fund, which is interested in Native American issues. And they basically recognize the value of indigenous roots and empowerment for their community, which is mostly the Latinx community. We would say, as white people, we would say that, but it's from their point of view, it's a variety of indigenous groups. They do things like provide, interpreters in Quechua and Mixteca, as well as Spanish. And they're working with Cooperation Humboldt on DACA issues, helping young immigrants with their legal situation. They're having a lot of activity going on in the community garden in Arcata behind the Presbyterian Church, and are working on gardens in Fortuna and Phillipsville. And I'll say too that garden is not only a beautiful garden, but it's also, then it becomes a center for community events. And they've also worked on some in Arcata out in Valley West, and are working on an embroidery project with women from Mexico. And this is, I think the kind of things that inspire us about this group is that they are trying to, they want to keep going. They have an idea, both of these groups, of sustaining into the future. And they're both working hard to create new leadership. And, in this discussion, you always end up dancing around issues of politics, because as the man who asked the question was saying, what do you do about logging? Is logging local and all that? Well, what ultimately changes things, the way our society functions, is affecting political life and, electing people that are going to help you do what you want. But from the bottom, if you can't get organized, you can't do that. And so I think that's why we like cooperation. I'll just speak for myself, why I like cooperation in Humboldt and Centro del Pueblo, because they're training their own people, they're organizing, and they're trying to respond to the needs of their communities.
Thanks.
What you got,
That's
Amy?
great. That was great, Felicia. I'm going to be reading from my script a little more than Felicia, but another organization that we chose to fund was the Cultural Fire Management, and they facilitate the practices of cultural burning on the Yurok Reservation and ancestral lands, which lead to a healthier ecosystem.
I think we had a good picture to go with this.
Oh, we did have a good picture,
Well, let's see. We hope someone will put that up for us,
but
but
that's okay.
we can go on without it. But you might see a picture come. It'll be pictures of some of the people doing their work.
And they're burning on the Yurok Reservation and ancestral lands, which leads to a healthier ecosystem and for all plants and animals, long-term fire protection for residents, and provides a platform that will in turn support traditional hunting and gathering activities for the Yurok. They also have worked together to educate CAL FIRE, and they're working along with CAL FIRE. And this has been a remarkable turn in our state during these difficult times of extreme drought and fire. And sharing this knowledge has been just a beautiful transition that's taken place. And through our work with the donor circle, with the Native American nonprofit organizations, as one of our considerations and concerns, we found that it's a common misunderstanding that tribes are well funded by casinos and by the federal government. But actually, many of these programs run independently of their tribal governments. And in fact, we realized through being educated through Lindsay Bear at the Humboldt Area Foundation that it is actually less than 0.03% of philanthropic dollars go toward tribal nonprofits, which led a significant amount of us from the donor circle to start another donor/ally circle, and we call ourselves Cultures in Solidarity. And we have, because we came to realize that they're doing, we had no idea of the tremendous work these indigenous groups were doing in our community, and without additional financial support, they were greatly limited. So in addition to giving money to these groups, they actually told us that it's equally as important that we become allies to them, that we stand beside them in social settings to be, a white face amongst dark-skinned persons. Because as much as we feel Humboldt County is very open-minded, there's a tremendous amount of racism here, and we found through these discussions with our Latinx and Native American Indigenous organizations that there's a lot of abuse. They suffer a lot of abuse. So being allies is equally as important. Another organization that we gave to and feel really good about is the Peninsula School. And they help their students develop academic and social skills necessary for participation in a democratic society. And they've identified positive character traits that include the capacity to care for oneself and others, and the ability to work with others in the community, and a willingness to take risks. They aim to provide students with opportunities to contribute in meaningful ways to our learning community and extended communities. And as they learn that individuals can make a difference in our world, they become our future leaders. And we found that education is a very upstream way to address our social issues. Developing new community leaders is really critical. Cooperation Humboldt is helping educate our community, and for that reason, these types of organizations have been really important to us and in our decisions about funding.
I'm going to share that image with all of us.
Oh,
Didn't wanna
great.
cut
Thank you, Alex. This is you.
We skipped page 3. We didn't do our breakout groups.
We did, yeah.
We should.
So the next one.
There's a question
Oh,
about
okay.
where's the Peninsula School?
Oh, Peninsula School is in Samoa. It's out in Samoa, actually. It's kind of across the street from the Samoa Cookhouse. Yeah, and we got a little off our sort of plan structure here, but I think one of the things and I was sitting here thinking about it again, as I do quite often when Annie was talking and when people were asking their questions. I think one of the things that's hard about the upstream downstream thing is that when you look at the video, it seems very simple. You start upstream because you're looking upstream, and these people are coming downstream and they're dying, and you can't just take care of them and think you're going to solve all the problems. But then when you think about what organizations to help or something, you know, it becomes quite unclear sometimes. And I don't think that we have always amongst ourselves agreement or a monopoly of wisdom on the subject. You know, for example, when we had someone mentioned Arcata House, somebody said, well, that's definitely downstream because it's taking care of a symptom of homelessness. But it's also, but to the extent that they're successful, they actually do impact people's lives. And I think that's important to acknowledge. Just the same with Betty Chin, and the same with her things in Eureka, because people have to really change to function successfully in her system, as they do in Arcata House. You know, people have to be open to change. And I would say that I think charitable giving is a good thing overall. I think people should do more of it. And I don't think we have a very precise answer to offer you about a lot of these things. And I think what we want to do is stir up a little thinking. And maybe we could go to our breakout groups.
Hey, Annie, first, so I put in the chat a list of all the organizations we've donated to.
Oh,
and
thank you.
And the organizations that have applied for this year. So you see it's a wide range of different kinds of organizations. And I want to go back to a question that Theodore asked about upstream. One of the things that's two organizations that have applied for grants for this year are they want to get BIPOC interns to work at two of the local environmental organizations. So that's a direct way that it's locally done, but in the long run, it's going to also impact upstream.
We thought that we would have some breakout rooms here and discuss in the rooms what feels good about your current giving, and does the urgency of the moment affect how you give. And Alex, will you help us with those breakout rooms? And
Yeah, Kim should be sending those out.
Yep, I just wanted to know, Anne, how long do you want to have the breakout rooms? Approximately 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
how about we make it 8 minutes? So
All right, so everybody, I have pre-assigned you to a breakout room, and you will go with one of the members of the donor circle.
I think Tom was raising his hand. Do you have a question, Tom, before we do that? Sorry, Kim.
No, that's perfect.
I guess not.
hi, Tom.
You all set? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and
Hi,
open all the rooms. Tom, did you have a question or no?
No, I'm sorry.
Well,
So you should automatically go into your room, and you can leave that room and come back to the main room at any time, and then you will get a notice about 30 seconds before it's time for the room to close. So here you go. Oh, there we go. Good job, Alex.
This is a complex one.
I'm gonna pause.
So Annie, somebody asked a question that I think everybody might want to know a little bit about, which is about the financial part and the membership part. Do you want to take that, or have somebody else do that, or me?
Oh, how about you?
Membership part of what? Of our group?
Of our group, yeah. How many people, how much money, that kind of thing.
Can you do that, Len? That would be great.
Yeah, so we started out with 14 people. I think we have 11 right now. We're looking for new members. You can see all of us on the screen. None of us are very young. So we're looking for, it'd be exciting to have a younger generation join us. And, you know, we've given away about $477,000 in 3 years. So if you do the math, all of us have contributed some sizable portion. I think some people have donated as much as $30,000. I think the average is about 10
A year.
a year. Thank you, per year. So they're all pretty sizable donations. So there are there are donor circles all over the country where people donate $100 or $500. So we just chose this because we wanted to try to have a larger impact because it's more money. But there's all sorts of different kinds of donor circles.
Well, let's do our reports.
Shall we report back
Yeah.
from our circles?
Yeah. You can start, Annie. You can tell about ours.
We had, it's really nice to hear that people are actually getting something out of our little conversation here, because everyone is donating locally and to direct services and to helping with people not getting evicted and Native Plant Society.
And we had a monthly donor to Cooperation Humboldt.
And a donor who's doing, monthly to Cooperation Humboldt, which, but has moved up from Southern California and is now keeping a foot in both areas to start donating more locally, but also continuing with donations down south. So that's all really good reports that we had back, but looking for interest in how to expand more social justice philanthropy, and that's our report. That's my report.
Lorraine, you were group 2.
Okay.
Is there somebody else wants to report back about their group?
I could briefly share in my group. We were pretty diverse. We had a Humboldt Area Foundation employee who helps donors give their money away, and just what one is challenged with of sort of focusing on the recipients rather than if I'm right with this, massaging the givers. I don't know how to say that, but I'll leave it at that. But much appreciated that role at the Humboldt Area Foundation. And then just the project of senior housing and having it blended with affordable housing, as well as those who can pay for senior housing, which is a very important need here in our community. And also supporting existing organizations like Arcata House and the Food Bank, Hatcher, the syringe exchange needle program. They all do help people get out of patterns that are harmful. But we also have this wonderful business that supports people financially to start their own franchise, and I love it that they have an agreement to pay forward once they're in a position to do so. And so lots of good ideas. Thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Molly Kate asked, do you have a dollar minimum for membership?
We don't have a minimum, but it's a hard question to answer because we don't want to discourage people, but you can see people give a significant amount. So that's the best I can do to answer. Maybe somebody else could answer better than that. It feels a little bit elitist in some ways. And so, Mary, you going to say something?
I was going to say, we talked about that. That was one of the questions that came up in our group as well. And that we began with people giving in the $10,000 range per person. But we have also talked about $5,000 annually per person. So there is no hard and fast rule, and we don't disclose that. So people send a check in. We also ask that people give a small gift to Humboldt Area Foundation Opportunity Fund, because they are supporting us, so there's, if you give 10,000, then maybe you would give 1,000 to HAF for the support they've given us.
I might add on at this time that if you are interested in starting a donor circle yourselves, Len Wolf and Ron White's email addresses will be in the chat at the end. And Len has actually started multiple groups, and some of those groups, I know that they had a significantly less amount of a financial commitment to get started. And another way that another type of donor circle that has really great potential is a family donor circle, where maybe the parents can donate a certain amount of money to each child, and then they can discuss as a family how they could do more social justice giving. So while we're encouraging a deeper reflection on our social justice giving, there's many ways to do that. Theodore?
I think many charities have sort of a group of people at the top who make decisions, discuss directions, and so on. And then the rest of the people are, quote, maybe contributing members, and they give small amounts. Have you ever thought of doing that? Seems like you could involve a lot of people that would want to give much smaller amounts.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that, Theodore. That's a wise suggestion. Are there any other groups that want to report back?
Quiet. It's quiet.
Pretty quiet. That's okay. We can move on if no one else does.
I'll just say I really enjoyed our little group, and we talked about a variety of issues: housing and seniors and food security and local groups, and really wanting whatever resources we have, small or more, to go in the ways that this group is talking about today, to really put our money where our important issues are. That's true for anybody and anything, but this social justice issue in particular. So yeah, I think that this has given people an opportunity to think about new ways of doing things.
As starting kind of wrapping up here, I think one of the things I wanted to mention is the individual versus collective donating. I'm a person who's kind of independent, and I kind of like to do my own thing. And so everyone says, oh, let's get together to do this. And I sort of thought, oh my gosh, more meetings, but I at the same time, I have found that, as in many other things in life, that there's value in individual things and there's value in collective things. And I think I have felt through the donor circle that I was more informed about a greater variety of things happening in the county than I was without it. And for example, when we first started out, as I mentioned, and we, got this information from Humboldt Area Foundation as suggestions of groups that we might like to fund, I'd never even heard of some of them, so it was exciting to me. And I would, sitting alone with my pile of mail asking me for money, that many of you are probably familiar with, I would not have known, had the ideas of doing some of those things. And also in conversation with people, so you refine your thinking sometimes, and you learn to value different approaches. And so I'm just saying that for myself, I have found some value in the collective process overall.
Mm-hmm. And certainly, and as I said earlier, that we're not here implying that individual giving or direct service giving is not super valuable, and that our community needs it, and that and I just want to commend you for being here and taking interest in maybe expanding your ideas of where you can give. I know before I got involved with the donor circle, I tended to respond to the envelopes that came in the mail asking for money. And I was just kind of automatically writing a check and donating to those organizations, which I still contribute to and feel good about that as well. But it's just what we have done, I guess, in 4 years is just gotten really into the social justice philanthropy minutia, which has taken us honestly 4 years to really kind of get it and see where is that happening in our community. So I just want to say my hat's off to all you guys for coming here and showing a deeper interest in that. And thank you for wherever you do give.
Can we take some time for more questions? Stephanie, you have something, yeah.
I was just going to contribute that my participation in the donor circle has been a great journey of learning. We have had many of the groups that we donate to come to visit us in person. We have seen them in person, and then of course more recently we have seen them on Zoom. So to be able to know the faces, that has really been very valuable to me, because in the process of deciding which groups to fund, all of us have kind of been out there and contacting folks and scheduling interviews and whatnot. And so in this meeting with them, we have then gotten a real feel for the people behind the name. And that's been really, I found that to be very valuable in my own understanding of what's happening outside of groups other than the, kind of the ones I feel like that are more well-known, like Arcata House and Breast Health Project, and which we all have our favorites. So this is just added to my understanding of the groups in our county and what they're doing, and makes me love living here all the more. So it's been a lovely journey to get to know the lovely people that are in this group, and brought us together for the sake of giving, which is a really great way to hang out with people.
Nice.
Are there any other questions? Anybody have?
Were there questions in the chat that we did not address?
I'm not sure if you answered this, but Kate McLean asked, how do we keep folks from drowning? She says, put our money upstream. How do we keep folks from drowning?
Water rings.
Very good.
This is the big question.
Sorry, I'm leaning into the screen. I'm trying to read the questions here. Do you have a formalized, okay, no, we already answered that.
It looks like Donna has a question. Donna, you need to, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, not a question, just a comment. I want to thank you all for sharing this information. It's really interesting and exciting to me, the whole idea that we can magnify our effects by giving in conjunction with other people. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Donna.
And I do want to thank you all for coming and considering this as an option for you all, or possibly joining a donor circle, creating one of your own. And all of you are doing great work, so thank you so much. And I want to let you know that next Monday, we are going to have Laurie Otker, who is the Executive Director for the Humboldt Bay Harbor Commission. And he will be talking about all the variety of projects that they're doing now, such as the fish farm and the Pacific Cable and the variety of things that they're involved with that impact our lives substantially. The wind farm, they're involved in all these projects. So you may want to come and listen, because it's I don't know whether the Harbor Bay Commission could be a potential recipient of our fund donation funds, because they are substantially affecting our economy.
Yeah.
So feel free to come, and thank you for coming today, and thank you for the members of the donor circle and our speakers. And thank you, OLLI.
Thank you, OLLI.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here today. Looking forward
Bye.
to
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Can we debrief
Bye,
somehow?
Mr.
Can we stay on and debrief or get on a different Zoom?